Welcome to MurderFiles 101. Tonight, we walk into one of the most chilling modern cases in America. A case that begins in a quiet Indiana town, but refuses to end. The Delphi Murders, 2 young girls, a winter trail, and a bridge that still carries whispers of the dead. Before we begin, pause for a moment. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Because time is central to this story. Minutes mattered, hours determined lives. And for Delphi, time now moves differently, measured only in before and after. February 13th, 2017. Delphi, Indiana, population just under 3,000. A place where most houses stood within earshot of the school bell, where the air smelled of wood smoke and soil, where teenagers still walked to each other's homes. A town small enough to feel safe, and yet it was here the silence broke. Abigail Williams and Liberty German were just 2 best friends, both 14. Abby had an easy laugh, her auburn hair often pulled back beneath a winter hat. Libby loved photography, her phone often lifted to catch moments others ignored. Together they were inseparable, bright, curious, and on the cusp of everything. It was Monday, February 13th. School was out for a staff day, a day off that felt like a gift. The kind of afternoon where boredom leads to adventure. By early afternoon, the girls decided to walk the trails near Delphi Historic Trail Park, a familiar, friendly stretch of woods. The stretch Azuri Bisariwar. Their destination, Monon High Bridge, an abandoned railroad crossing, standing tall over Deer Creek. Long weathered planks stretched across empty air, no railings, nothing between footsteps and the valley below. For kids in Delphi, it was a test of courage. For Abby and Libby, it was simply an afternoon dare. At 1:35 p.m, Libby's sister dropped them near the trailhead. The girls bundled against the cold, smiling as they set off. No one could have guessed that this short walk, the kind made countless times before, would be their last. The bridge was waiting, and someone else was waiting too. By 2:07 p.m, Libby posted a photo to Snapchat. It showed Abby crossing the Monon High Bridge, her arms folded tight against the chill, her small figure walking along planks that stretched like ribs across the void. It was a picture of friendship and freedom. It was also the last. Minutes later, another recording, but this one never went public until police revealed it later. Libby had the instinct to hit record. On that phone, in those minutes, the case's most haunting evidence was captured. A grainy voice, a man's footsteps, words that still echo, "Guys, down the hill." By 3:15 p.m, the girls were supposed to be picked up by Libby's father, but they weren't there. He waited, called, walked the trail. By 5:30 p.m, family members were searching, panic setting quickly, because these were not the kind of girls who disappeared. Something was already wrong. By evening, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office and local volunteers had joined the search. Flashlights combed the trails, calling out their names, hoping to hear laughter or even annoyance. Hours passed. The bridge loomed above them, silent, wooden planks, now ominous in the sweep of beams, but the girls were gone. The search stretched into nightfall. Temperatures dropped. Families clung to hope. Perhaps they had wandered further or gotten lost. But Delphi was small. Its woods were known. No one simply disappeared here. Still, searchers left reluctantly at midnight, promising to continue in the morning. The next day, Delphi changed forever. Tuesday morning, February 14th, 2017, Valentine's Day. At 12:15 p.m, searchers found what they had been dreading. About half a mile from the bridge, near Deer Creek, the bodies of Abby and Libby were discovered. A crime scene too brutal for police to fully describe. The safe heart of Delphi collapsed. Investigators sealed the area immediately. Families broke down. News spread faster than breath. The bridge became more than just an abandoned relic. It became the line between childhood and horror. Whatever had happened in those woods, it was deliberate, it was violent, and it was unlike anything Delphi had ever known. The Delphi murders were no longer local. By evening, headlines stretched across Indiana and beyond. 2 girls, a recorded voice, a small town with no answers, and an image that burned itself into the nation's memory. Abby on the bridge, frozen in a frame of innocence seconds before terror arrived. The morning after the bodies were discovered, investigators knew they were facing more than a tragedy. They were staring at a mystery laced with cruelty. The Monon High Bridge, once a place of teenage dares, was now a crime scene. Officers walked the path the girls had taken, marking spots, measuring distances, and then came the detail that separated this case from so many others. Libby's phone had not only captured images, it had captured sound. Somewhere between the Snapchat photo and the final moments, she pressed record. The evidence she left behind was chilling, not just for what it revealed, but for how little it gave away. A blurred man in jeans and a jacket walking toward them, his head down, his face shadowed by a cap. And then the voice, calm, steady, commanding. "Guys down the hill." A fragment, only seconds long, enough to terrify, but not enough to identify. For investigators, it was both a blessing and a curse. Proof that the killer had walked that bridge, spoken those words, but not proof strong enough to put a name to the shadow that spoke. Investigators released the image of the man, Bridge Guy, as he quickly became known online. Grainy, pixelated, but undeniably present. His stance seemed deliberate, his gait heavy. Social media exploded with theories. Some saw an old man, others a young one. Some thought he was limping, others swore he was carrying a weapon. Delphi became a hive of suspicion. Every stranger eyed, every neighbor whispered about. The voice clip released later only deepened the obsession. Who could speak with such authority? Who in Delphi had the nerve to walk that bridge in daylight and corner 2 girls? And yet, for all the circulation of that clip, no one could point with certainty. The anonymity of the image became part of its horror. Bridge Guy was everywhere and nowhere, a silhouette burned into the mind, but faceless all the same. The crime scene itself offered little relief. Police were tight-lipped, refusing to share details of how the girls had died. Reporters pressed for answers, but investigators only said it was unusual and not typical. Behind closed doors, officers wrestled with something more disturbing. The scene bore elements that suggested staging, objects placed with intent, patterns too deliberate to ignore, but the specifics remained sealed in files, locked away from public view. Even seasoned investigators left shaken. What had been done to Abby and Libby was not only violent, it was ritualistic, and that fact meant one thing. Whoever Bridge Guy was, he hadn't simply killed, he had arranged, he had planned. As weeks passed, police flooded Delphi with resources. The FBI joined, canvassing neighborhoods, collecting tips, interviewing anyone who had crossed the trails that day. A composite sketch was released in July of 2017, showing a clean-shaven man with youthful features, sharp cheekbones, and piercing eyes. For many, it contradicted the grainy figure on the bridge. Some said it looked too young, too neat. Still, tips poured in by the thousands. Yet each lead seemed to collapse under scrutiny. No arrests came. The bridge remained suspended over Deer Creek, silent and still, while the families endured vigils, funerals, and endless speculation. Delphi itself felt divided. Some convinced the killer was a stranger, others certain he was one of their own. That division became its own kind of haunting. The haunting deepened in 2019, when investigators shocked the public by releasing a second sketch. This one depicted an older, heavier man closer in appearance to the blurred image from Libby's phone. The contradiction between the 2 sketches confused even seasoned followers of the case. Was Bridge Guy young or old, clean-shaven or rough? Police hinted both sketches were relevant, suggesting the killer might disguise himself or appear differently depending on context. But clarity was lost in the contradiction. More disturbing still, investigators revealed that Libby's recording captured more than the public had heard. In private, they held back longer audio. They hinted it included the sound of the man ordering the girls, perhaps more than once. The public would never hear those words. Only the families, left to carry a burden heavier than any bridge could bear. Delphi now lived with two sketches, one image, one voice, and a murderer still among them. When the sketches were released, the public's imagination ignited. Every man in Delphi, who matched the broad strokes of the drawings, suddenly became a subject of suspicion. Gas station clerks, retired farmers, truck drivers, even local teachers, all were whispered about in diners and backyards. Some families stopped going to church. Others avoided the trails altogether. Rumors swirled, and the small town became heavy with paranoia. But investigators knew better than to chase gossip. They sifted through thousands of tips, each one a potential lead, each one a chance at closure. Yet every name seemed to collapse under the weight of evidence. Still, a few men rose to the surface, figures who became fixtures in the ongoing speculation, not because of clear proof, but because of patterns too dark to ignore. One of the first was Daniel Nations, a drifter with a violent past. Arrested in Colorado months after the murders, he had threatened strangers on trails with a hatchet. The resemblance to the bridge guy sketch was unsettling, and his presence on remote paths echoed the setting of Delphi. For a brief moment, headlines blared that a suspect may have been caught, but DNA and timeline inconsistencies forced investigators to clear him. The disappointment was crushing. Delphi's families, still raw with grief, felt the case slipping further into uncertainty. Nations faded into obscurity, but the questions lingered. Could someone so unstable truly not be involved? Or was Delphi's killer even more ordinary, hiding in plain sight? Then came Charles Eldridge, arrested in 2019 for attempting to meet a child online. His mugshot bore a resemblance to the second police sketch. The heavier man with coarse features. Rumors spread like wildfire. Could Eldridge have lured the girls under the guise of conversation, leading them onto the bridge? But investigators never publicly tied him to the murders, and once again, the trail cooled. Each suspect who briefly lit up the case seemed to fade into shadow as quickly as they appeared. It was a cycle that tortured Delphi. Hope, suspicion, disappointment, over and over again. Other names surfaced. Men already convicted of crimes. Men serving time in prison. Men who happened to live near Delphi in 2017. Each one investigated. Each one considered. Yet none brought resolution. The internet became its own investigative machine, with forums dissecting every image, every phrase, every timeline detail. Some pointed fingers recklessly, spreading accusations that scarred innocent lives. The case had grown too large, too public, and too starved of answers. In the vacuum, speculation became its own form of cruelty. For Abby and Libby's families, the whispers online were salt in an open wound. They didn't want theories, they wanted justice. By 2020, the case felt frozen. The trails of Delphi remained open, the bridge still standing, but every step across it carried weight. Visitors brought flowers, photographs, tokens of remembrance. For the families, the waiting had become its own prison. They clung to vigils, anniversaries, and the memory of two bright girls who had dared to walk a bridge on a winter afternoon. The killer remained out there, faceless, his voice echoing in the silence. Guys, down the hill. Every suspect investigated, every rumor chased, and yet the truth seemed always just beyond reach. Delphi had become a town defined not by what was known, but by the endless void of what wasn't. For years, the Delphi case hung in limbo. Every anniversary brought renewed pleas, news conferences, and the haunting replay of Libby's recording. Investigators insisted progress was being made, but to the families and the public, progress felt like silence. That silence finally broke in October 2022. After more than 5 years of speculation, authorities announced the arrest of a man named Richard Allen, a 50-year-old pharmacy technician who lived quietly in Delphi itself. The revelation hit the town like a thunderclap. For years, people searched outward to drifters, criminals, strangers passing through. Yet all along, the alleged killer had been living just miles from the bridge, blending into the rhythms of small-town life. Alan was a husband, a father, and by all accounts, an ordinary man. He worked at the local CVS, filling prescriptions for neighbors, exchanging greetings in checkout aisles, living among the very people who now looked at him with horror. In the press conference, investigators gave little detail, citing the integrity of the ongoing trial. But the weight of the announcement was undeniable. A name, a face, finally attached to the ghost that haunted Delphi. For many it was shocking not because of who Alan was, but because of how normal he seemed. The idea that the man on the bridge could be someone they saw every week, someone who lived quietly among them, was more unsettling than any theory of strangers in the night. Court documents later revealed fragments of evidence that tied Alan to the crime. Ballistics linked an unspent round found near the bodies to a gun registered in his name. Witnesses placed him on the trails that afternoon, and perhaps most disturbingly, Alan himself admitted being at the bridge on February 13, 2017. Though he claimed he had left before the girls were killed, it was not a confession, but it was a presence. That admission, paired with forensic and circumstantial evidence, was enough for prosecutors to move forward. Delphi, for the first time in years, saw a path toward answers, but answers in this case were never simple. As details emerged, they painted a chilling picture. Investigators believed Alan acted alone, that he had stalked the trails, and that his encounter with Abby and Libby was deliberate. The phrase "down the hill," once disembodied and spectral, now seemed tied to a man who had lived within walking distance of the crime scene. Yet even with an arrest, the case resisted closure. Key details of what happened in those final moments remained sealed, redacted from documents, held back from public view. Prosecutors insisted secrecy was necessary for the integrity of the trial, but secrecy kept the haunting alive. Families and townspeople were left once more in the shadows, with more questions than answers. Richard Allen pleaded not guilty. His trial loomed, promising to dredge up years of grief and speculation. But even before verdicts could be reached, Delphi changed again. The town that had lived under suspicion now faced the horror of recognition. The killer wasn't a shadow in the woods, nor a drifter on the highway. He was, allegedly, the man who stood in line at the grocery store, who filled prescriptions, who lived quietly on a suburban street. Whether guilty or not, Alan's arrest forced Delphi to confront its deepest fear, that the bridge had never been haunted by a stranger. It had been haunted from within all along. Even with an arrest, closure in Delphi remains elusive. Trials move slowly, hearings delayed, motions filed. Each new legal update reignites the wound for the families, forcing them to relive that February day. The community waits, but waiting has become its own torment. For 6 years they carried suspicion. Now they carry anticipation mixed with dread. If Richard Allen is convicted, justice will have a name. If not, the haunting deepens, and so Delphi remains suspended, its story unfinished, balanced like the wooden planks of Monon High Bridge over the cold void of Deer Creek. What makes this case endure is not just the brutality of the crime, but the fragments of evidence left behind. Libby's phone, Abby's image, the voice command, they act as relics of a tragedy too young to be history. That Snapchat photo, the casual capture of a friend on a bridge, now feels like a warning preserved in pixels. The voice recording, only 3 words long, carries more weight than entire case files in other investigations. These remnants remind us that the girls fought to leave behind something, even if they didn't know it. They gifted investigators and families the only window into those final minutes, and it is through those fragments that the case still breathes. But fragments also haunt. Guys, down the hill. Those words linger in classrooms, in grocery stores, in living rooms across Indiana. They are whispered by people who never met Abby or Libby, but feel the weight of their absence. They remind everyone that a short walk on a winter afternoon ended in silence that cannot be explained away. For those who cross Monon High Bridge today, every step is heavier. Some go to honor the girls, others go because they need to see the place where innocence collapsed. The bridge has become more than wood and nails, it is an open wound in the landscape. The Delphi murders also highlight the fragility of small-town trust. For years, neighbors eyed each other with suspicion, unsure who among them might carry the truth. When Alan's name surfaced, it was not relief that followed, but something darker, the knowledge that the man who allegedly walked the bridge had walked their streets too. It raised the unsettling question: how many killers live ordinary lives, blending into the background, unnoticed, until violence drags them into the light? Delphi's answer was one no one wanted to hear. The line between safety and horror was thinner than anyone imagined. As the trial unfolds, one truth remains: Abby and Libby's story is far from over. The bridge still stands, weathered by seasons, watched by visitors who come not to dare its height, but to honor two lives cut short. The case reminds us that evil rarely announces itself. It hides, it waits, it whispers, and sometimes it leaves behind only fragments: a blurred photo, a grainy voice, a trail that should have led home. The Delphi murders are not history yet. They are still present, still unresolved in spirit, still pressing against the air of Indiana. The bridge haunts not because of what happened upon it, but because of what still waits beneath. Some cases end with clarity. This one doesn't. The Delphi murders remain an open wound. An arrest made, but the story unfinished. Two girls walked across a bridge, one winter afternoon, and never returned. What lingers is not only the horror of their loss, but the chilling truth that danger can hide in plain sight, inside the walls of a town that once felt safe. Remember this: killers don't always arrive as strangers. Sometimes they live quietly among us, unnoticed until it's too late. This was MurderFiles 101. Another case waits in the shadows. Stay ready.